Look at your right thumbnail. Pick one spot on it, smaller than the head of a pin. Inside that spot there are about 10 trillion carbon atoms. Now pick one of them. That single carbon atom was forged inside a dying star, somewhere out there, about 6 billion years ago, by the collision of 3 helium nuclei at a temperature of 100 million degrees. The star exploded. The atom drifted. It rode a cloud of gas into the disk that would become our solar system. It sat inside a piece of rock. It became part of a sea, then a plant, then an animal. And then last Tuesday, you ate it. It is sitting on your thumb right now. I want to tell you where it goes next. Not what someone hopes happens to your atoms. Not what your religion teaches about them. Mechanically, atom by atom. Pathway by pathway. The way physics actually answers the question, by following the matter. You are made of about 7 octillion atoms. That number is 7 followed by 27 zeros. It is not a metaphor. It is a count. Of those, roughly 65 out of every 100 are oxygen, 18 are carbon, 10 are hydrogen, 3 are nitrogen, 1.5 are calcium, and 1 is phosphorus. The rest is a thin sprinkle of sulfur, potassium, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and trace metals, iron and zinc and copper, in amounts so small that the entire iron content of an adult human body melted out would weigh about as much as a single carpenter's nail. Now I want you to feel where these atoms live. Run your tongue along your teeth. The hardest substance in your body is sitting in your mouth, enamel, and most of what it is made of is calcium phosphate. Specifically, a crystal called hydroxyapatite, where the calcium and phosphorus atoms sit in a precise lattice with oxygen and a little hydrogen. The same crystal makes up about 70% of your bones. Touch your forearm. Press down through the skin and the muscle until you feel the bone underneath. That bone is a scaffold of calcium and phosphorus. It is also, by mass, the heaviest single mineral structure in your body. About 15% of you is bone. Now press your finger against the soft part of the forearm, the muscle. That is mostly water. Your body, taken all together, is about 60% water. Inside every cell of that muscle, water molecules slide past each other and through membrane pores at speeds you can barely picture. A single water molecule travels several thousand kilometers per second on its random thermal jiggling, colliding with another molecule once every trillionth of a second. The water in you is not still. It is a hurricane held in place by the geometry of your tissues. Above that, the carbon atoms, the fats in your cells, the proteins in your muscles, the genetic material in every nucleus. Every one of these is built around a carbon backbone. The carbon in you is the architect's frame. It bonds with itself to make rings, chains, sheets, helices. Nothing else in chemistry behaves that way at room temperature. That is why carbon is the basis of life, not because of magic, but because at the temperature of a planet like ours, carbon is the only atom that can build complex structures and also tear them apart again, easily, with the energy available from sunlight and food. And then there are the breath atoms. Take a slow inhale. Hold it for a second. The oxygen molecules now sitting in your lungs are, statistically speaking, going to do something quite specific. About a quarter of them will pass through the lining of your alveoli, those little air sacs at the end of each bronchial tube, 300 million of them, with a combined surface area larger than a tennis court, and they will hand themselves to a hemoglobin molecule in a red blood cell. The rest you will breathe out. The ones that get in will be delivered to a mitochondrion somewhere in your body and used to burn a sugar molecule. The carbon and the hydrogen and the oxygen will rearrange. The carbon will leave you as carbon dioxide in your next breath. Some of the hydrogen will leave as water vapor on the same breath. The oxygen that just arrived in you from the air around you will leave your body in less than a minute, attached to that carbon, as part of the molecule of your exhalation. So already, while you are sitting there listening, you are leaking, not metaphorically, atom by atom. Now here is the first law I want you to hold in your mind, because every step that follows is governed by it. In the year 1789, in a Paris laboratory, a chemist named Antoine Lavoisier weighed everything before and after a chemical reaction. He burned things in sealed jars. He measured the gases. He measured the ash. He measured the soot. And then he wrote a single sentence which has never since been contradicted by any experiment in the history of physics or chemistry. Nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. That sentence is doing tremendous work. It is telling you that whatever your body is made of right now, every one of those 7 octillion atoms, must go somewhere. Not might. Must. There is no exit door in nature labeled disappearance. Atoms cannot be uncreated by burning them. They cannot be erased by burying them. They cannot be carried into a different universe by the hopes of the relatives at the funeral. They are persistent. They are conservative. They are obedient to physics. And physics says, when the patterned, organized configuration of your body falls apart, what we call death, the atoms must redistribute themselves into other configurations. Lavoisier did not know about your body when he proved this. He knew about candles and mercury and oxygen, but the law he discovered applies to every atom in you, with no exceptions, ever. 5 years after writing that sentence, Lavoisier had his head cut off in the French Revolution. His atoms went where physics sent them. The same physics is waiting for yours. I said your atoms were forged inside a star. Let me show you why I can say that with such confidence. Because what comes next depends on understanding where these atoms were before they were you. In 1957, 4 physicists, Margaret Burbidge, Geoffrey Burbidge, William Fowler, and Fred Hoyle, published a paper in the journal Reviews of Modern Physics. It was over 100 pages long. They called it Synthesis of the Elements in Stars. Physicists today still refer to it by the initials of the authors. They worked out, almost completely, how every element heavier than helium in the universe was made, reaction by reaction. They calculated what happens in the core of a star when the temperature reaches 100 million degrees, and 1 billion degrees, and 3 billion degrees. They showed that 3 helium nuclei could fuse to form a carbon nucleus. They showed that adding another helium gives you oxygen, another, neon, another, magnesium. Up the periodic table the star climbs, fusing as it dies until it reaches iron. And then, because of the way nuclear binding energy works, the star can fuse no more. It collapses. It explodes. And in that explosion, the heavy atoms, the iodine in your thyroid, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your teeth, are flung into space. William Fowler received the Nobel Prize for this work in 1983. Hoyle should have shared it. He did not, for reasons that have nothing to do with the science. So here is the situation. You are sitting there. You think you are a person. You are also a very small, very organized portion of stellar explosion debris. The carbon in your thumbnail was, 6 billion years ago, inside a star. The same is true of the oxygen in your lungs. The same is true of the iron in your blood, and the iodine in your thyroid, and the zinc in the enzymes that are right now reading these words for you. There is no atom in your body, not one, that did not exist before the Earth existed. The hydrogen, if you want a curiosity, is older still. The hydrogen in the water inside your eyeball has been around since 14 seconds after the Big Bang. Almost 14 billion years. You are an arrangement of very old things. Here is a fact that disturbs people the first time they meet it. Even while you are alive, the arrangement is not stable. The atoms are not loyal. A researcher named Jonas Friesen at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm did something quite clever. He realized that during the years of above-ground nuclear weapons testing, roughly 1955 to 1963, an enormous spike of radioactive carbon, called carbon-14, was released into the atmosphere. After the test ban treaty, the spike began to fall. Plants absorbed the carbon. Animals ate the plants. People ate the animals. The level of carbon-14 in the food supply was a kind of atmospheric date stamp, like the rings of a tree, but written into every loaf of bread. Friesen realized he could use this stamp to date individual cells in the human body. Take a cell. Measure the carbon-14 in its genetic material. That material does not change after the cell stops dividing. So whatever the carbon-14 reading is, it tells you the year in which the cell was made. He published this work in the journal Cell. The results are extraordinary, not because they shout, because they are precise. The cells lining your gut are about 5 days old. The cells of your skin's outer layer about 2 weeks. The red blood cells circulating right now, about 120 days. The fat cells in your belly, about 8 to 10 years. The skeletal muscle in your biceps, about 15 years. Your liver replaces a meaningful fraction of itself every year or two. Your bones, and this surprises people, turn over about 10% of their content every year, so most of your skeleton has been swapped out in the last decade. But the cortical neurons in the part of your brain that does most of your conscious thinking, those are, in the vast majority, as old as you are. The neurons you were born with are the neurons you have now. There is a popular saying that you replace every atom in your body every 7 years. That is not quite right. It is closer to, every tissue replaces itself on its own schedule, and many of your atoms are flowing through you constantly, while a small core, your central nervous system mostly, stays put. The carbon atom on your thumbnail right now was not on your thumbnail last year. It arrived in a piece of food, was incorporated into a keratin protein, and will leave again when the nail grows out and you cut it. So when I tell you where your atoms go when you die, I have to first tell you that most of them are already on their way out, every day the whole time you are alive. Death is not the start of the redistribution. Death is the end of a process that is already happening. What death does is remove the pattern that held them in place. Let me walk you through the 2 main exits. Suppose your body is cremated. The crematorium furnace runs at somewhere between 1400 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 800 to 1000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to ignite the carbon-containing molecules in your tissues. The combustion reaction is the same one that happens inside every mitochondrion in every cell of your body. Carbon plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide. Hydrogen plus oxygen yields water, except now it is running at thousands of times the speed. In about 2 to 3 hours, the soft tissues are converted to gases. The carbon in your muscles and your organs and your skin and your hair, about 13 kilograms of it, in a typical adult, becomes carbon dioxide. That is about 47 kilograms of carbon dioxide, leaving through the flue, going into the atmosphere. The water in you, about 42 kilograms of it, leaves as steam. The nitrogen in your proteins leaves mostly as nitrogen gas, with some nitrogen oxides. The sulfur in your hair and skin leaves as sulfur dioxide. What is left, after a few hours, is the part that does not burn. Bone mineral, calcium phosphate. About 2 to 3 kilograms of it. That is what is in the urn. Not your atoms exactly. The atoms in your bones that survived the fire. The rest of you is in the sky. The carbon dioxide that came out of the chimney does not stay still. Within days it mixes through the lower atmosphere. Within weeks it has spread across continents. Within a few months, plants somewhere have absorbed some of it through photosynthesis. The carbon atom from your right thumbnail, the one you picked at the start, might within a year be inside a leaf of grass in Argentina, or a wheat plant in Russia, or a pine needle in British Columbia. The wheat is eaten. The carbon enters a child. The child grows. A small fraction of the carbon dioxide will dissolve in the ocean, become bicarbonate, and be taken up by plankton or coral. A small fraction will be buried in sediment and stay there for thousands or millions of years. Most of it will cycle through the biosphere again and again, in and out of plants and animals and the air and the sea, for the next several hundred years before it eventually settles into longer storage. Now follow what the fire does, because the same chemistry happens underground without the heat. Suppose instead your body is buried. The combustion is now slow and biological, but the math is the same. A bacterium does not have a flame, but it has the same chemistry as a furnace. It takes a carbon-containing molecule from your tissues, combines it with oxygen, and releases carbon dioxide. The same reaction. just colder, and catalyzed by enzymes. Arpad Vass, a forensic anthropologist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, has spent decades cataloging this process, measuring the volatile compounds released as a body decomposes. He identifies, by gas chromatography, the precise molecules and the precise sequence: putrescine, cadaverine, indole, scatole, methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. Each one is a stage in a chemical handoff, from human tissue to bacterial mass to soil organic matter to the carbon cycle of the planet. It takes longer underground. In a typical climate, in a typical soil, a buried body might take between 10 and 50 years to lose nearly all of its soft tissue, depending on the depth of burial, the soil chemistry, the temperature, and whether the casket is sealed. A sealed casket slows it. A vault slows it more. Embalming with formaldehyde slows it further still. But none of these stops it. They are delays measured in years or decades, against a process that physics will eventually win, because the second law of thermodynamics is not negotiable. The carbon in a buried body goes mostly to the soil first. Then, as the soil respires, to the atmosphere. The water leaves quickly into the surrounding earth, then up through plant roots, then back into the sky as transpiration. The nitrogen is taken up by soil bacteria, fixed into ammonium, then nitrate, then plant proteins. The calcium and phosphorus in your bones may stay in the grave longer. Calcium phosphate is fairly stable, but over centuries even, that gets dissolved by acidic groundwater, taken up by roots, and put back into circulation. If your body is buried in a field, within 10 years, a measurable amount of your carbon is in the trees around you. Within a century, you are in the local food web in ways no instrument could trace. Within 1,000 years, your atoms are distributed across the planet, indistinguishable from any other atoms of their kind. Within 1,000,000 years, your atoms have probably each visited every continent. Within 1 billion years, the time scale on which the Earth itself reorganizes, the planet has remembered nothing of the particular arrangement that you were. Now stop. I want to put some honest brakes on what I have just told you, because I do not want you to take any of this on my authority alone. What I have told you about Lavoisier, that mass is conserved in chemical reactions, is the bedrock. It has been verified in millions of experiments. There is no honest scientist alive who doubts it. The closely related conservation of mass energy in relativistic frames is the most thoroughly tested principle in all of science. You can put that one in the strongest category there is. It is as solid as any claim physics has ever made. The stellar nucleosynthesis story, that the heavy atoms in your body were made in stars, is almost as solid. We can observe the abundance of elements in stars of different ages. We can predict, from the equations of nuclear physics, what those abundances should be. The predictions match. The Burbages and Fowler and Hoyle won, between them, a Nobel Prize for it. Some details are still being argued. Exactly which kind of stellar explosion produced exactly which heavy elements. But the broad picture is not in dispute. Frison's carbon-14 dating of human cells is solid for the tissues he measured. It is replicated. It is consistent across labs. Where I would urge caution is on the popular claims you may hear about specific organs. The 7-year total replacement myth. That is wrong. Some tissues replace fast, some slow, some not at all. If you hear someone tell you exactly how often any particular tissue is renewed, ask them which paper they got the number from. The actual numbers vary by individual, by age, by health, and by tissue type. What I have told you about the cremation chemistry, the carbon turning to carbon dioxide, the water turning to steam, is straightforward combustion science. Solid. The exact percentages may vary a little person to person depending on body composition. The redistribution into the biosphere, that your carbon ends up in plants and animals and soil over time, is solid as a population-level claim. As an individual atom claim, it is statistical. I cannot tell you whether the specific atom I made you pick on your thumbnail at the start of this lecture will end up inside a tree in Argentina, or a fish in the Pacific. I can tell you the probability distribution over its possible futures. That is not the same as a prediction. It is the best physics can do. So treat the laws as certain. Treat the population statistics as well-grounded. Treat the personal atom narratives as honest stories about what is statistically likely. I have told you all three. You are entitled to know which is which. Now I want to talk about something that bothers me, and I will be careful, because I am not in the business of telling you how to spend your money. When a person dies in this country, the average funeral and burial costs the surviving family somewhere between $7,000 and $12,000. A premium casket alone can cost $5,000. A burial vault, a concrete liner that goes around the casket, adds another $1,500. Embalming adds several hundred. A high-end memorial granite stone, several thousand more. The industry that has grown around this final transaction generates, in the United States alone, around $20 billion a year. The widow at the funeral home, 68 years old, just buried her husband last week, being shown the price list for her own prepaid arrangement, the mahogany option, the bronze plaque, the 1,000-year vault, the promise that her atoms will stay where she leaves them. I want to ask a physics question about that promise. What is being purchased? The casket is not preventing the redistribution. It is delaying it by some number of years or decades, depending on its seal. The vault is delaying it further. The embalming chemicals are slowing the bacterial action, but none of them are stopping it. Every one of them is fighting a delaying action against the second law of thermodynamics, which has never lost a fight in the entire history of the universe. The atoms are going where physics sends them. The casket changes the timeline by some fraction. It does not change the destination. The destination is set by the same chemistry that put the atoms together in the first place, by Lavoisier's law, by the carbon cycle, by the slow chemistry of decay. The most expensive casket on the market will, given a few hundred years, lose its battle. The atoms inside it will end up in the same soil, the same air, the same plants, the same animals as the atoms in the cheapest cremation. I am not telling you what choice to make. People have many reasons to want a certain kind of burial. Religious reasons, family reasons, the simple human wish to mark the place where someone you loved is. Those are not physics questions. Those are questions of meaning. I respect them. I am only telling you that if you are paying a premium to keep your atoms in one place, you are paying for delay. The atoms will not be obedient to the contract. The honest version, the version physics insists on, is this. The atoms in you came from a star. They visited a planet. They organized themselves, very briefly, into the very particular arrangement that thinks of itself as you. They will, on a timescale that does not care about your funeral expenses, return to circulation. They will become other things, many other things. Atoms have no loyalty to any one configuration. They were not built to belong to you. They were lent to you. Let me come back to something I said earlier and finish a thought. Because what I want to leave you with is not the physics, but what to do with it. I said you are made of about 7 octillion atoms. That is true. I also said that at any given moment, many of those atoms are leaving you and being replaced. The gut every 5 days, the skin every 2 weeks, the blood every 4 months, the skeleton over a decade. So in what sense are you the same person you were 10 years ago? Not in the sense of atoms. Your atoms are not the same. Most of them are different. You are the same in the sense of pattern. The atoms in you are a kind of standing wave. The way a wave on the ocean is not made of the same water molecules from one second to the next. The water moves through the wave. The wave moves through the water. Your atoms move through your shape, and your shape persists through your atoms. You are not the matter. You are the configuration the matter is briefly in. The configuration is what dies. The matter does not. There is a sentence I wrote about this once. I, a universe of atoms, an atom in the universe. Both of those things are true at the same time. You contain a universe of them. You are also, when seen from far enough away, just one of them. When the pattern that is you dissolves, The atoms do not dissolve. They take up new patterns. Some of them, statistically, are going to be inside a person who is not yet born 50 or 100 or 1,000 years from now, who will use them to think with, to recognize a face, to remember a song, to feel a feeling. That is not poetry. That is the conservation of mass. There is a phrase your grandmother probably said at a funeral: ashes to ashes, dust to dust. People say it gently. Sometimes they say it as a kind of resignation, as if it were the sad part. But it is not the sad part. It is the chemistry. The dust we come from is the dust the stars made. The ashes are what is left when the pattern lets go. The atoms are not finished. They are between assignments. So let me take you back to the start. That carbon atom on your right thumbnail. Look at it again. Pick the same spot. It is going to leave you. It is going to leave you whether you do anything or not. Whether you are buried or burned, whether you are old or young, whether your name is remembered or forgotten, that single atom is going to go on. It was made in a star. It has been in 1,000 things. It has almost certainly been inside other people before you. It will be in other things and other people after you. The atom does not need your permission. It does not need your fear. It does not need your grief. It only needs the next host. You were a good one. Tell me, before you leave, which atom in your body do you think has been with you the longest?